if you are transitioning, or if you're doing a career pivot, like what I will do, realistically, I would encourage you to have a plan, um, because creative entrepreneurship can be very unpredictable, like we've been talking about. So make sure that you have a safety net of some sort. If you're going to run experiments, if you're going to explore, different strategies and that sort of thing, just make sure that if you're in your 9 to 5, you're putting funds aside to ensure that you can actually make like a proper breakout, as opposed to sort of landing in a ditch as soon as you leave your job.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Teely,
And I'm Dami.
and this is the Creative Africa podcast.
This podcast features flourishing African creatives who share a vision to keep artists and creators across the continent informed about how to tap into the lucrative potential of their work.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope the podcast leaves you feeling informed, refreshed, and ready to make the most out of your creative talent. Let's get right into it.
Welcome to another episode of the Creative Africa podcast. I'm Dami, and I'm going to be your host for today. And with me here, I have Fungi Dube. Fungi is someone who I've been following for quite a while now, and I absolutely could not have her be a guest on the podcast as well. So I'm really glad that she said yes to our request. And before we go into anything, guys, Fungi has a very beautiful website that you have to visit as long as you're listening to this. Over to you, Fungi. Would you mind giving us a short intro about who you are and the work that you do?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dami. So I am a brand visual webflow web designer, now kind of type designer, who is from Harare, Zimbabwe. I have about a decade plus of experience in design, and my work is heavily influenced by elevating African narratives. So if you think about everything to do with um, patterns, colors, historic graphic symbols, textures, that is where I look to when I work. And my goal really is to ensure that I always cultivate like Afro positive sentiments. So just uplifting the African narrative, designing in such a way that I can also recognize myself and others can also see themselves in my work. But yeah, that is who I am.
All right. Thank you for that introduction. And one thing I would say is that just based on what you've said now, when it comes to your work, anywhere I come across it on the internet, sometimes before I even see that it's coming from your account, I already know that it's your work just because of how much it usually has a lot of African elements integrated into that. Like almost all your brand identity projects, I always see something tied to some African culture or patterns or something related to that. And through that, my first guess is this Fungi's work, and it usually is. It usually is. So that brand identity is really strong. But yeah, also I've also seen that you have been more recently going into typeface design and all. And yeah, I'll probably have to learn a lot from you when it comes to that area, because that's also something I'm looking to get into as well. But yeah, again, thank you for giving us an intro into who you are, what you do. So I would also like to, get some more background on what inspires the work you do. I mean, you've already mentioned that a lot of it is based on elevating African narratives. But was it always that way? Did it start out that way? Were you doing, design, not really considering that initially, or was it always what inspired you? And if so, or if not, then what inspires your work today?
So it hasn't always been like this. So I am a self-taught creative. My formal education is in something that is completely non-design related. So I studied the double major in science, and I worked a formal job in science for like 6 years before I decided that, hey, I need to pursue design full time. So as I was learning during that period, you find that a lot of the content that you come across is probably going to be, like video content on YouTube, maybe some tutorials that are sprinkled here and there over the internet, maybe, like some short clips that you find on Instagram. So the lens in which I learned really didn't pushed me to design in a culturally inclined way. It just pushed me to learn the fundamentals and the techniques. And, if I'm sure anyone can attest to the fact that when you're also learning, you also imitate, right? So you're imitating what you're seeing. So when I did feel proficient enough to start exploring work for myself, after having mastered, like the tools and everything like that, my design also kind of looked like the way that I learned. So it's not to say that, there's anything wrong with like minimalist type design, or there's anything wrong with like heavily typographic work, like Swiss influences and that sort of thing. All of it is very pretty. But as I did more and more of it, I started to feel a lot more detached from the work. So as to what created that, I can't really pinpoint it, but you kind of wake up and you're like, man, something's not right. Like something is missing. And I decided to really like explore that and kind of like reflect and introspect and be like, okay, I've been doing this for X amount of time, but what is that thing that's missing? So I must have bumped into a few pieces of literature, and I also bumped into a book called African Alphabets, which is by Prof. Sakima Fundikwa, who is, like one of the most known like Zimbabwean graphic designers. Like he started a school like way back then and that sort of thing. So the more I sort of started discovering that kind of content, I was like, wait, the missing piece for me is the fact that I don't see myself in the work, and I don't feel myself in the work. And as I did more research and I went online, I discovered that there was a gap. So essentially, when it came to the branding space, when it came to the web design space, you weren't really seeing a lot of like African inspired kind of work. Um, Regardless of it being very beautiful work, like you weren't seeing culturally inclined work from the continent. You could see it maybe from like Japanese like graphic designers. You can see it from Brazilians and that sort of thing. But I was like, wait, where are the Africans in this mix? So that was like the turning point for me. I was like, no, I have to make this shift. It's gonna be something that is experimental at this point, but I feel like it's very important for me to design from a place of familiarity. So things that I see around me, like my context, my historical context, my community, my day to day. And hopefully that is going to sort of quench like this thirst that I have, or it's going to fill in the gaps that I have. So fast forward, I kind of then decided, hey, I'm going to do a passion project based off of this new information that I have. I'm going to assess how I feel about it. I'm not sure how people are going to respond to it, because it's always scary, right? When you post your work online, people are like, oh, we don't come for validation and everything like that. I'm like, guys, you kind of do. Because you want to be super proud of your work, but it also gives you a boost when someone else is like, oh, this is really cool work too. So it was a coffee packaging project where I explored like a few African countries, and then I picked from those countries in terms of like their culture, their landmarks, just some of their history, and I kind of combined it into an illustrated like coffee packaging project. I put it online on LinkedIn. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to sleep, and I went to sleep. I woke up the following day and I checked my phone and I was like, wait a minute, did I get hacked? Like, what is going on? Because like there were so many notifications, and I had never seen like that many notifications on my phone before. So I was like, what is going on? So I look in, I check, and it's all like this overwhelmingly positive like feedback and response to the work that I posted, and basically lovely strangers on the internet saying, hey, like we haven't seen anything like this is really inspiring, it's cool to see this kind of work. And I was like, okay, so I think that's the mission. I was lacking something, and I feel like I found that something. And ever since then, like I wake up, like I live, I eat, I breathe, I sleep, designing from that lens. So that's sort of how that happened, and how my inspiration then and how I learned kind of forced me to push a little bit further and find myself within the work. And that's where we are today.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I feel like um, that's a very interesting story, first of all. But then I feel like a lot of other people probably would have, or a lot of people would go in the opposite direction, also based on the same reasons that led you in the direction you went. So, for instance, with the whole finding, I think one of the reasons why we have a lot of designers still, just focusing on the minimal design work that you see online, that you watch in your tutorials, or I don't know, even in typography, things that are more like Latin based, or the traditional typography we are all familiar with. Again, it's when that's all you see, you probably feel like that's the only way that design should be most of the time. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you would usually neglect what you see around you, especially if you're not seeing it online, just as you said, being validated by others. But you know that if you work on some minimal typeface or minimal logo, you're going to get all the likes and all the validation you are looking for. But then there's that fear of, what if I try something new and no one likes it, or if someone even criticizes it negatively, and then you just decide to, even if you're inspired to do something, you could just put it on the sidelines and continue with what is already being validated. And I feel like that's the importance, or that's why it's important that we have to share more of our stories. The people who are doing African based design work have to start sharing more of that, so that more African designers start to see that this is something that we can actually put out there and focus on. And we have a lot of inspiration over here. We don't have to get things from, what's already been put out for years and years and years. We have things that are not yet out there that we
Mm-hmm.
can base our design work on. So I also relate to the whole fear of trying something new. I feel like I've held back on a lot of things just because I was scared that if I put this out there, no one is going to like it. So what's the point of putting it
Mm-hmm.
out there? But yeah, it's a risk that you have to take. And you
Yeah.
never know if people would resonate with it until you do that. You never know if you would wake up in the morning and see those 1,000 likes on that post. And if you also do not see that, it's also not an issue, because you've put something you authentically created. So it's never,
Exactly.
yeah, it's always good to try. So yeah, I totally relate to that, and I agree with that as well. But also you mentioned that you started out as a scientist, and I assume then you were doing something more corporate, or more 9 to 5. So
Mm-hmm.
how was your process of transition from that space into being a full-time creative entrepreneur and doing design work? And what was your experiences? And do you also feel like corporate work is something that's necessary, or it's an experience that's necessary for creative entrepreneurs to have before they go into being an entrepreneur?
Oh, okay. So many good questions. So my journey started in 2014. That's when I graduated. And then I was looking for full time employment for about 6 to 7 months, if I'm not mistaken. And it was particularly hard. And I'm sure it still is, even in this current time, to find gainful employment. So I was very frustrated. I was just like, I don't know what's going on. What am I going to do? And I decided that I needed to teach myself a skill so that I could curb my frustrations at that time. It just so happens that as I was growing up, I always had a creative inclination. So I would hand draw a lot of things. So even when it came to like gifts for my family members, like little birthday cards, things like that, I would always draw like my favorite cartoon characters at that time and like give that to someone. But when it came to pursuing like my formal education. And this is not to say that my parents are not amazing and they're not supportive, but I think something somehow in our brains just clicks that, hey, you have to pursue something traditional, right? And that's how we were raised. You're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're an accountant, that kind of thing. So that's why I sort of started out like in the science discipline, right? So what then happened is, as I was learning, and my journey to actually learning how to design was, I don't know, maybe you could call it divine order, because I'd never even known that people can actually design. I'd never known that people can go to school for design, because I happened to be on YouTube the one day and the top recommended video for me was a Photoshop tutorial. And I was like, I don't even know what this is. I don't even know why this is being recommended to me, because I don't think I've ever opened anything to do with this. But I just clicked into it and my mind was blown. I was like, what? You're telling me that people can use their computers to actually like do this thing, and it's something that I could have gone to school for? What? Yeah, it was just like one of those moments. I was like, okay, this is actually mind blowing information for me. So I just ran with it. I did eventually end up getting my 9 to 5, like you said. But I would go to my 9 to 5, I'd come back home and I would burn the midnight oil, just like wanting to master everything. I was like, okay, I've done the Photoshop. Let me move on. What's the next thing that I can learn? And it's like on a jet engine of a laptop with cracked software, because I was like, I need to get my hands on this thing and I need to learn. So the transition came about because the design bug like really, really bit me hard. And I was like, wait, like I need to do something about this, to the point that it started to feel uncomfortable for me. Where, when you just have like a burning desire, like I have to do this thing, I have to do this thing, I have to do this thing. But it also came with the reality of not knowing what it'll be like to actually pursue something like that, to go from having a sure salary, right? On the 25th of every single month, regardless of how much it is, like I know that there's something that's coming to me and I just have to go and do my 9 to 5 duties, and I know that I'm safe, I'm secure. To this thing where you kind of like, I have to start building, like, what is my business model? Like, how do I go about it? Like, what if it doesn't work? And, all those like uncertainties and stuff still just in the back of my mind. So eventually, what pushed me is the fact that it was COVID year, and my where I worked, unfortunately, they let me go. It was a very painful process for me, because the way that they also let me go was what I considered to be like the most unsavory way possible. And I'm sure maybe some of you who are listening can resonate to the fact, like, you put your heart and soul into your work. Like, you make sure you show up, like, you make sure that you are meeting the targets and everything like that. So it always comes as a big shock when you get let go, and you get let go without any prior notice or anything like that. You're like, wait, like, what's going on? So I think that is what also pushed me to be like, you know what, at this point in the game, like, you have nothing to lose. So you are going to go out, you're going to do the research that you need to do, and you're going to build this thing, regardless of how long it's going to take. Even if it's like a step a day, 2 steps a day, you're going to build brick by brick, and you never know what's going to happen. Like you rightfully said, it's only up until you try that you actually know what it's going to be. And at the time, my dad was also super supportive, and he was like, you know what, the worst thing that anyone can say is no. So just go for it and do it scared and see where you end up. So that's when I decided to do a lot more free internet research into how to, formulate a strategy, how to build a personal brand, how to, go about everything when it comes even to client acquisition, when it comes to client onboarding, when it comes to project management. Like, what tools am I using, right, to ensure that I have a seamless workflow? I started doing all of that work. On top of that, I was experimenting with posting online, because I think visibility is very important. So I will be experimenting with different kinds of posts. So I'm like, okay, this is my work. How do I talk about my work? Where do I post my work? What are the what other things am I doing to ensure that I can sort of repurpose my work across different kinds of platforms? So that is what I did. And I did that for a solid 6 to 8 months. I was like, hey, if I get the result that I like, then that's great. But this is also a period that's allowing for me to explore and to see what my options are and to see what performs great and what doesn't perform great. And I can then just go back and like iterate on that and then, repurpose it and see what happens. But in all of this, I was also like kind of smart, I would like to say, because in hindsight, I'm like, okay, the thing is, you still need to eat, right? So I was like, at least when I was doing these experiments, like I had a little bit of something that I had saved up. I was also like very frugal when it came to spending because I wasn't sure of what my financial future looked like. So I was like, at least make sure that you can sustain yourself whilst also running all of these experiments. So yeah, that's pretty much like how that came about. And I mean, a few years later, I'm a full-time creative now, and I really enjoy it. And it's been something that has been sustainable for me, and I'm grateful for
That's definitely definitely a journey. That's a long journey to where you
that.
are
Yeah.
today. Very interesting one. And I feel like, okay, first of all, I wanted to ask, do you think that, if perhaps you weren't, you mentioned that at during the COVID time, you got like let off from work. Do you feel like that was a like probably one of the most significant aspects of you getting into creative entrepreneur? Do you feel like if that did not happen, you would not have gone into creative entrepreneurship, or you would still have considered it maybe at some point? Because again, just also talking from my experience and what you also mentioned, I feel like sometimes the fear of leaving that security of the 9 to 5 job sometimes trumps the passion you have for wanting to go into something else that it's exciting but does not seem as stable when it comes to your income. And
Mhm.
yeah, I feel like that could be holding a lot of other creatives somewhere in their 9 to 5s or something. And do you feel like
Mhm.
that if you didn't have that experience, you would not have come on this path?
I think it was still bound to happen because even within that year, I had been thinking about breaking out into creative entrepreneurship for a year and a half. But like you said, that fear of not knowing and just not having enough knowledge, like as to how to go about it, is what held me back. But I would wake up every day and be like, okay, it's I need to do this. It's gonna happen. It must happen. It's gonna happen. And it just so happens that in the year that I got let go, I had also like interviewed for like design jobs, right? So I was like on the low, I was like, okay, I have a day off today. I'm gonna go off to a design interview just to see what happens with that. But nothing had sort of materialized, so the thought was definitely there. For those of you who are people of faith, I believe that it happened the way that it happened, where I had to get let go because God was like, listen, it's time. You've been thinking about this thing and you keep procrastinating on it, you keep pushing it forward. But I need for you to leave this and get into the next thing. So I'm going to just shut the door so that you do not open it or even think about going back into it, and you're going to push this thing. So the thought was there. The fear to act was more. But at the end of the day, I'm grateful that I got let go because then that also then really pushed me to pursue this.
Thanks for that. And yeah, I think sometimes we just need that involuntary push for us to
Mhm.
find our way in life sometimes. So yeah, I've had those moments, and some of those moments have been what have led me to where I am today as well. And yeah, I I would also say that, or I would want to also ask, when it comes to the experiences you had while you were working 9 to 5, do you feel like that's something that's, or that's an experience that's necessary for creative entrepreneurs to have, because I've had conversations with a lot of other creatives and I've heard opposing opinions. Some people say, if you want to do entrepreneurship, you learn by doing. So it doesn't matter if you've had any corporate experience or any business experience before. All you have to do is just decide to go into it and be ready to learn along the way. But then I've also heard people say that it's important to have corporate experience, working somewhere, preferably something related to what you also would like to do on your own. And I would like to know where you stand on that question. Do you feel like your 9 to 5 roles, although you said you're doing something more scientific and not really design related, do you feel like there were skills you gained from that, or you had experiences that have really helped you be a better creative entrepreneur?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to start like with the last bit, then I'll go back to the first question. So when it comes to skills, I definitely feel like they are transferable. So things that I mastered even in my degree as I was working, so being able to think like logically, how to set up methods, things like that. Those are still things that I implement to this day in my design work because everything is systematic, right? So you're thinking about where you're getting your inspiration from, you're breaking that down into tiny little digestible bits so that you can then process it. So I think that the skills are definitely transferable. It also has made me more organized and more meticulous about like tiny details and that sort of thing. So I definitely see how that whole era helped me with what I do now. But what I'll say is I think I may be neutral because obviously I'm not someone who has like formal education in design or any sort of formal education in business and entrepreneurship. So I do see the merits in having that kind of experience, especially if you're going to be working independently and running your own business of sorts. Um, I know that there are people who also invest in online courses. They have career coaches, business coaches, and I can definitely see how all of that will be super helpful, even before you start doing anything, for you to have that foundation that you build from. But also at the same time, I can see how you can also learn by doing because I had to learn by doing. So we can say that yes, I had a 9 to 5, but my 9 to 5 is so different to what I do now that some of the processes, some of the things that you need to think about are completely on opposite ends of the spectrum. So I had to really learn by doing and I had to learn by making mistakes and I had to learn by observing others as well and how they go about things. So if anything, I'm neutral. I see merit in both. If you're someone who's able to get access to all of those things, where you can have people who coach you and walk you through certain things, or where you can access different kinds of literature, programs, courses that allow for you to get that business acumen, great. If you can be in a corporate setting that allows for you to be able to work in a team, perhaps that allows for you to be able to manage your time well, like in terms of like delivering milestones and everything like that. That also is really good practice for what you're gonna have to do when you are working independently as a designer. But if you're someone who has not had the privilege of being in those spaces, you can definitely still make it by being super level headed, by being committed and dedicated to learning whilst you go. So all of those things that you then encounter on your learning journey, the mistakes that you make you better with each day. So yeah, I'm like in between. I'm not gonna say this is good, this is bad. I think there's merit in both parts. It just depends on where you are, what you have access to, and your current setup.
Well, I also have the same the same stance. I haven't actually ever publicly said where I stand. So yeah, but I feel like regardless of if you're working, it's fine if you'd like to move into creative entrepreneurship, and the experiences you get from your 9 to 5 will most likely be helpful, especially if they are more related to what you would like to do. But then again, I feel like you can also pick up those skills again from just learning on your own, as well as the experiences that you would have while you are working as a creative entrepreneur. So I definitely agree with that. I don't really think that one is better than the other. But then again, sometimes I feel like as creatives, most of the time, one of our biggest how I put it, one of our biggest hurdles to climb when we're becoming creative entrepreneurs is having or moving from that role of whatever you're doing being a hobby to
Mm.
becoming a business. And there's a
Yes,
lot of discipline that you need to cultivate that comes with that. And I feel like sometimes you might, if you're not really someone who is just naturally, a choleric, very disciplined and all, I feel like you could get that from your experience at a 9 to 5 job,
yeah,
and that could help. Otherwise, you just really have to sit down and, know that you have to be, this is no longer just a hobby anymore. This is how you're making your money. And if you're
yeah,
not serious enough about it, then you're not going to make that money. So,
yeah,
yeah, it's something you
exactly.
learn along the way. Yeah, so I would also like to know how so you've been a creative entrepreneur now for about, you said 6 to 7 years, if I got that correctly,
No, so I've
or
been designing for like a decade plus. I've been a
a
creative
decade.
entrepreneur for about almost 5 years.
Okay, 5 years,
Yeah.
5 years then. Yes. So, how would you say your journey has looked from when it started up to where you are today? What have been the highlights, the lows, and also the expectations you have versus what you had initially versus what it actually is? What are those things? How has your journey been for you, in general?
So going into this, I had goals that I set. Obviously, I had objectives that I set for myself, but I didn't necessarily have expectations because that feels a bit heavy for me as a person because you can never really predict what the outcome is going to be. But I think that you can take actionable steps towards achieving things that you have in mind, like for your vision. So that's how I set it out. I have this notebook and I still have it to the day where I wrote down 12 things that I wanted to be able to achieve, or 12 markers of success for me personally. And I still have it and I look through it and I'm like, it's so crazy that everything that I've written down here has come to pass. And I'm grateful for that. So I wanted to make sure that I focused on community. I wanted to make sure that I developed my own original voice and not just any kind of voice, but a voice that also has authority and impact and influence when it comes to talking about African design. I wanted to also, one of the things that I really wanted in my heart was to ensure that when anyone thinks about African inspired design, my name should be there. With whoever else's name is there, like I want for my name to be there. Not only as Fungi, but as a Black Zimbabwean, as a Black African woman. Like I want for my name to be there. So those are some of the things that I set for myself. It wasn't really like, oh, at the end of this year, like I want to be able to make $100,000 or any of that sort, of which those things are nice and we always want those things. But I just wanted to ensure that I built a strong enough digital footprint, if that makes sense. So, what I would then say is the way that unraveled for me was absolutely shocking to my system because a lot of the things that happened are things that I would never have dreamt of happening, even though I wrote them down and I was like, I want for these things to happen. Because in my first year, maybe my first 2 years, some of the opportunities that came my way, I was in shock and I couldn't believe it. And I even remember questioning, like you would open up an email and be like, wait, was this meant to come to me? Um, are you sure? And I would write back to them and be like, hi, thanks so much for writing to me. I'm not sure if you were particularly looking for me because of the context of this email. So I just wanted to verify, like, did you want to send it to me? And they're like, yes, like we are sending it to you. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So it was a lot of those kinds of moments where I would not ever have, like I've already said, would not ever have imagined that those emails or those Instagram DMs would be landing in my inbox. Uh, so in the first years, I managed to do like typographics, where I gave a talk. I gave a talk at A Type I. I also did a few more workshops and seminars and everything like that. And I was like, oh, people actually want to hear what I have to say, and they want to learn from me. That's pretty cool. That's amazing. I like that. I love that, and I'm really grateful for that. So those are some of the things that really like just generally shocked me, and just being able to connect with other designers like across, not only across Africa but across the world. So the internet can be a very beautiful place if we use it correctly. So just being able to have wholesome exchanges and conversations, meeting some of them in person, traveling to go and meet my designer friends was something that really like just opened up a whole new world for me. Being able to also just work on my passion projects, being able to learn more, being able to earn more as well. Because obviously, when I started, it wasn't like that. But you get to a point where you set up systems that are sustainable, and you get to earn more, and you get to earn sustainably as well, so you can actually just have better upkeep and everything like that. So it's just a whole bunch of things that have happened, and I pray continue to happen, where you get to grow as a person, you get to grow as a designer, you get to collaborate with really cool people, you get to have fun, awesome conversations with people like Dami just because of the internet, things like that. So that's what I would say has changed. Um, my expectations, like I said, I didn't have any, but I continue to set big, bold, ambitious goals for myself that I don't even know how I'm going to execute. But I'm like, one day is one day. And I will look back on this thing that I wrote down and be like, wow, so we actually did that. And that's just how I continue to do it. When it comes to disappointments and maybe things where I failed and everything like that, I think that naturally comes with the journey. So in my context, that takes very several pockets because there are very few ways in which I failed. So it's things like even when you're starting out and maybe you have like like terrible client experiences, or you're not organized enough, or some of the things you actually learn from them pointing them out to you. Be like, oh, I thought that this was gonna be like, and you're like, oh my gosh, like wait, actually, I didn't do that and I should have done that. And now you kind of like feel horrible about it, and you're like, oh gosh, no one is ever going to work with me ever again because of this. And that kind of thing. But those moments are the moments where you also learn how to tighten up your ship. You're like, okay, so this is what happened the last time. So in order for me to avoid this going forward, I need to make sure that I remove this and I add this. So I had a few of those as well. And not because the work is not good, but I think the way that you just roll out, and the way that you maybe communicate, the way that you hand over things and that sort of thing is just not as tight as it needs to be. So yeah, obviously there are opportunities as well, maybe like where you don't agree and you lose out on revenue and that sort of thing, but you learn as you go. You learn as you go, and you also learn to be smarter as you go. When you're like, okay, because maybe I'm not going to get work this month, maybe I get work in the next 2 months, however that may look. But when I'm not working, am I okay? Like, am I making sure that I'm taking care of my accounts and my finances so that I'm good and that sort of thing? So you just learn as you go. But yeah, I think that's what I would say. Definitely didn't have expectations, but I had little small objectives that I've set for myself.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think also just another follow-up question, just pigging back on the point you made about building a digital footprint for yourself. So also with you being into branding, or more specifically brand identity designer, how much would you say that branding and building a digital footprint plays a role in the success of creative entrepreneurs today? Because I feel like, just as you said, one of the ways I met you was because I saw you on the internet. I probably saw someone reshare one of your projects. I think the first thing I saw was the threads project you had made. One of your, I think that was a passion project, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So I think when I saw that, someone I follow reposted that, and that was how I got to find your account and look at us now having a conversation. And that was just because you had a digital footprint and you have started building your brand online. So how important would you say branding in general is in the life of a creative entrepreneur, and how best would you say creative entrepreneur can build their online brand?
Um, Awesome. So I'm definitely an advocate for building personal brands, 100%. Um, I know that there are different ways in which people can do that, and other people say, no, it's better for you to build a business model and a business brand as opposed to a personal brand. But, to each their own. And the reason why I think that any sort of creative entrepreneurship should build a personal brand is because as we interact online, people will definitely buy into good work. So if I see something good, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. But I think what we also need to remember is that people also buy into people. So it's not to say that, hey, let's have your entire wardrobe out on the internet. Okay. Tell us every single thing about what you do from the moment you wake up to the moment that you sleep. Okay. We just want to get to know you. Like, what are you about? What is your belief system? Like, what is your value system? What are the things that are important to you? What are the things that inspire you? What are the things that you look into when you design? Those sort of things, because I think the more that people get to know those parts of you, the more they're like, oh, I've never physically met Dami before, but he seems like a really cool guy, right? And he seems like someone who's very dedicated, someone who's very committed, but he also really good at what he does. So if I take the chance to message him and say, hey, I want to work with you, I'm not going to feel a way about that, right? Because I'm going to be very confident going into it, knowing that, hey, from what I see from his online digital footprint, this is bound to be a really successful collaboration. And maybe after that, hey, you never know, we could work on a few more projects together. So that is what a personal brand does for you. It makes you human. It allows for people to be able to connect with you, even if when they've never physically met you. And it allows for people to also have a deeper emotional connection to the work that you do. So I will always advocate for that, making sure that you take the time out to build a sustainable strategy that allows for you to have a flourishing personal brand, because that is definitely going to impact the kind of work that you do, the kind of spaces that you end up in. And the thing to also think about is that because the internet is the same for all of us. Like, we read the same tweets, like we watch the same reels, like we watch the same TikTok videos, and even just checking out how other people go viral overnight just because they posted like some fire content and their lives are completely changed forever, right? Goes to tell us that visibility is also very important. So my thing is that anyone who aspires to be a design um, or creative entrepreneur cannot afford to not be visible and to not have a personal brand. Um, yeah, I took a pause there because I really needed to emphasize that, because when you think about it, the people that you're meeting and the opportunities that you're going to get and the projects that you're going to work on are not because you walked into a room to shake someone's hand. Sometimes that is what happens, but it's because someone is sitting in the corner of, I don't know, Germany somewhere, or sitting somewhere in Mozambique, and they're just online scrolling and they're doing Google searches and they're typing in keywords on Behance and they're looking for people to work with. If you are not there and cannot be seen, then there's absolutely no way that you're going to get those opportunities, because people are not going to know that you do what you do. So you have to show us that, hey, this is what I do and this is what I'm about. So personal branding plus high visibility, um, I think is the winning formula for that. And you have to consistently work at it as well. So consistently work at it. I know that other people have a work ethic that allows for them to be able to post 24/7. They're always online, they're always connected. But I think the consistency, in my opinion, comes from knowing that whenever you can and do show up online, you're still your very authentic self, and the quality of what you're presenting is still pretty high. That is what I would regard to be consistent, in my opinion. So, yeah, those would be like my takeaway points. But the thing is to ensure that people get to know you as far as you'd like to share, and people are also able to see you and what you do.
I think there's this book I once read. I feel like a lot of artists probably have also read that. It's called Show Your Work by Austin Kleon. And it's
Mhm.
just him talking about how important it is to put your work out there, whatever it is you're doing, even if you feel like probably at the start, you most likely feel like you're not doing the best work, especially if you're comparing yourself to people who are much more experienced in your field, which again is not the best thing to do. You just have to put your work out there because these people
Mhm.
probably have 10 more years of experience ahead of you,
Yeah.
so you would not expect to have the same output of work. But just as you mentioned, it's you just have to put your work out there because no one would know that you do what you do if you don't show them what you do. And
Mhm.
also, just as you mentioned, it's also important to show yourself in that work as well, like show what inspires you, show your processes, what makes you different from another person who does the same thing, because people don't just relate to the work. There's probably a lot of people who do like brand identity design or webflow design, but then they know that when I see Fungi's work, I'm not just expecting a minimal brand identity. I'm going to see something that's infused with a lot of African elements and patterns and designs and African inspired designs. And that's part of what makes your work. And that's what makes you different from others. And it's important that you put that out there alongside your work as well. Because you also touched on like not just putting out work but making sure that the quality of the work is also up there, because you might be someone who posts 24/7 every day, but then you just post the work and you go, no context, no caption, nothing. We don't know what inspired this, we don't know your process. And I feel like at the same time that might just be something pretty that someone would just double tap and like and scroll by, but there's really no context. There's nothing for them to understand or to push them to pick you over someone else who does your work. So it's also important to infuse yourself, your values, and your inspiration and your process as well into what you put out there. So I totally
Yeah.
agree with that. Yeah. And just also when it comes to you mentioned earlier on that throughout your journey you've come across resources, you've learned how to use tools that help you to do your work better, to run your business better. So what are some of these tools or concepts or systems that you've built that have helped you to run your creative enterprise better? So it could go from software to, I don't know, resources, books you've read, just anything in general that has helped you get to where you are today.
Awesome. Yeah, the issue with software is so tricky right now. I don't know if you're an Adobe user, but there's a whole bunch of things that are happening
Yeah,
with it. It
I've seen the whole thing online. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's super controversial. But when it comes to software, I have been an Adobe user for some time. Um, but I'm going to put a pin in that because I'm exploring alternatives right now, because I also believe in using software that caters to the designer, not to capitalism. So there's that too. But I use Figma religiously. I also obviously use Webflow, which is where I do all my web design projects. Other design tools that I use, Procreate from time to time, but I'm trying to get better. So those are the tools that I use. But in terms of project management, communicating with my clients, all of those things, Notion is my go-to. So Notion I really love because I set up collaborative workspaces with my clients so that they're kept in the loop uh, at every single phase of the project. So I do have a template that's on my website as well. It's for free if you'd like to download it. And what that allows me to do is there's a calendar embedded in it. So they're not really like questioning, hey, when is the next deliverable? When are we doing this? They can just sort of scan through the calendar and see that, hey, on June 10th, we have to have our first review and that sort of thing. So it keeps things super seamless. They can also share feedback with me. They can drop any assets. I can also then show them my different proposals at every single stage of the project. When it comes to mail, I prefer Zoho Mail, Zoho. That's what I use. I just think that they have a lovely interface and the features really allow for you to be able to seamlessly, like, organize your emails and like sync your calendar and everything like that. So that's what I use. When it comes to accounting, I have been using Wave for the longest time. I know quite recently the policies changed in terms of who can sign up for a Wave account, but I was there in the beginning before that change happened. So that's what I've been using throughout. And it's been really great because obviously you can do your invoicing and everything like that, but you can also see what your year to end looks like. You can also automate payments for certain things and all of that. And then there are a few other platforms that I use just in terms of like managing money, like receiving payments and that sort of thing. So that's like the software kind of um, toolkit that I use in order to make sure that I stay on top of everything. I also other than like my local drive, I don't really save a lot to my local drive. I do back up my work on an external hard drive, but I save everything to the cloud. So I have my Google Drive, which is so dear to my heart, and it has a lot of the work that I do there. So just so that I can avoid any sort of incidences where things crash and that sort of thing. So that is also a good tip for anyone to say, hey, where do you save your work? You need to think about that. You need all your archives from the 2000s and all sorts of things so that you can always reflect on your journey as well to see how far you've come. So make sure you have them in a good space. But yeah, I think that would be it. I can't really think of. Oh, and then just other softwares that I use like Loom because I make a lot of like audiovisual presentations for my clients when you can't have a meeting. So I'll record everything. I think this is very important as well because it's one thing for you to prepare this amazing proposal and just send it out and let them have a look at it, but it's another thing for you to walk through your rationale, to explain your thinking behind the proposal. Why did you make these decisions? This is what I ended up on. This is how I was thinking about that, because also that also helps to give your clients like more context as to your solution, as opposed to just sending something all for them to look at and then they will form their own opinions of things. So that context is important. And another also handy tool that I've just started using as well is called Markup. So if you have any sort of URL links that you need to post, especially for web design projects, after you sort of recorded something for them, you can always send them that link where they can add physical comments to the actual live site and say, oh, maybe we can change this and do that and that sort of thing. So it just makes it easier to get that kind of feedback. Um, but yeah, I think that's what I can think about now. But there are always tools that are evolving and things that are coming up and that sort of thing. So always experimenting with things. But that has been like my trusty toolkit for some time now.
That's very insightful, and I can relate to some of them. At least I've used Notion as well. I use Notion every day. I feel like you can plan your entire life on on Notion. It just has so much functionality. So I really relate to that. But then also just besides software or tools, are they systems that you've created that just help you do your work maybe better or faster, things
Yeah.
like that. And also on top of that, are there like resources that you've how do I put it, probably people you watch, people you listen to, or books you've read that also help you that have helped you do your work better? Are there things like that as well?
Yeah, they are. So when it comes to process as well, like I've experimented with a few things over the past couple of years, and this is what works for me personally. So I think one of the biggest challenges when it comes to creatives becoming creative entrepreneurs or having a sustainable business model is that some creatives focus too much on the creativity and not the internal processes, right? So how what what kind of steps do you take from the time that someone inquires with you for a project? Are you just like, oh hey, okay, cool. This is what you want to do. Let's jump right into it, right? Or do you have like a systematic way of actually approaching that? What that looks like for me is that I will obviously write back to them depending on whether they've gone through my website, Instagram, whatever the case is. But I keep it very professional, very formal. Thank you so much for writing to me. In order for us to be able to talk through this, these are the next couple of steps that we'll need to take. Those steps include a discovery call where I hop on a Zoom with them, I introduce myself, I get to hear more about what they're trying to do. I'm also a firm believer in listening to what they want to do and about their brand because I also push for them to invest their money in the right way and with the right person. So having that conversation allows me to assess whether I'm the best fit. Do I have the necessary skill set that's required to execute what they have in mind? If not, I'm making recommendations. I'm like, listen, Dami, this is really great and all, but you are investing your money. So I think that maybe you should reach out to someone else who has ABCD because then you will spend your money better that way. But if we're the best fit, then I will also send them a questionnaire. So a discovery questionnaire, depending on whether we're doing branding, whether we're doing a web design project. And it basically allows for us to be able to put pen to paper. So a lot of the questions that they're going to answer are questions that we would have verbally spoken about, but it will also go in depth asking them other things to pertain to the project that are going to help me as a designer to determine like what the right direction is. I sent them a project proposal after that, and this covers all working terms. So this is basically our contract. So it's telling you how much the project is, how long it's going to take, what the deliverables are, other working terms to do with things like trademarking, with copyright and ownership, to do with what happens if I get sick during the project, right? What happens if I feel like I need to suspend the project because what I thought was a good fit is not a good fit? What happens if you're not happy with the progress of the project? Hopefully not, right? But it covers all of that because the thing is to also ensure that your interests as the designer are covered as well as your clients. So everyone is happy days at the end of it all. And then from there, then I'll onboard them onto our Notion. I will give an instructional as to what they should expect, when they should expect it. And it's very collaborative for me. So I will definitely be behind the computer screen, punching away, putting things together, adding in rectangles, all of that. But I'm also keeping them in the loop to be like, okay, I've done this because I think that this would work with ABCD based off of your target audience, all of those strategic kind of things. And yeah, when it then comes to handing it over, making sure that things are neatly like laid out, like label your folders, like make sure it's easy for them to navigate what they're getting at the end. And it may seem like very obvious information, but I do think that it still is something that needs to be spoken about all the time because the way that you deliver makes a difference as well. It's one thing for you to be an absolutely amazing talent as a designer, but if you don't have um, like core processes that allow for you to also deliver on a high level, that is probably going to affect your output. So those are things to consider. When it comes to like books, resources, I listen to Seth Godin. I don't as much anymore, but Seth Godin is really good, especially with any kind of business model. So this is marketing. It's definitely one of my favorite books. I've read it cover to cover several times. And it basically talks about visibility and how you have to be seen in order for you to be able to basically change the trajectory of your business or your brand. And another book that I really enjoyed is Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. I think that's a really good book too. So if you're someone who's kind of not sure about how to approach your personal brand, like how do I build stories around what I do and that sort of thing, very informative book. Um, yeah, but I think those would be like the if I could recommend two books, like I would recommend those two books. But here and there, I do listen to other content. I watch other designer stories. Actually, that's one of my favorite things to do. So if there's like a podcast like what we're doing now, or a video, something on YouTube where someone is talking about their journey, those are things that I like listening to as well because I think they are more practical for me, and it tends to be it hits closer to home when you see someone talking about or hear someone talking about where they started, the steps that they took, the mistakes that they make, because you may be able to resonate with their journey as well. So yeah, those that is how I go about it, and that is what I would recommend. But there's a lot of content out there. I think you've just got to filter through and see what makes sense for you and where you're at. But if you're going to read any two books, read This Is Marketing by Seth Godin and read Building a Story Brand by Don Miller.
It's very, very insightful, and I'm pinning it up here mentally to go find that book. I feel like I have seen This Is Marketing, and I'm also a bit familiar with Seth Godin as well. So I probably would read that first. So yeah, very insightful. And just in line with that, then are there any creatives that you might look up to as role models that our audience would also be interested in learning from or checking their work out as well?
Yeah, so many of my design friends. So what I'll say about myself is that I can't say that I have a role model, right? And the reason I say that is because I'm not sure of what their full character is like, right? So I can't really assess what that is like unless if it is someone that I know personally. So someone can be like, "Hey, Beyonce is my role model," and I think that's okay. But I don't really know her as a person, so I can't say that. But maybe I could like what she does, right? So, but when it comes to creatives who inspire me, which is how I'm going to phrase it, and creatives whose work really resonates with me, there are so many, first of all, but amazing, amazing African designer friends like Chisa, like Such Design, Samuel, love his work. Um, some of my Zimbabwean designer friends as well, like Osmond, like Tava Take, and then even like photographers like Lennox, the photographer, you can find him on Instagram. Tandiwe Miru, so good. Um, oh gosh, Nunsi, oh, there's so many. Um, yeah.
maybe maybe I could have given you a number and I should have been like, what are
Yeah,
your top
yeah,
five or something. But yeah, I mean, I am familiar with them. Are there
yeah.
more? You can go on if you want.
I think there's so many of them. Shay, like the work that they want to use Afrotype. There's so many creatives that and the thing is, it's not only just designers, like it's designers, it's photographers, it's cinematographers, it's fashion designers, it's illustrators, but like the way that they approach their work from like an African lens just absolutely blows my mind. So when I'm able to see that and interact like with their craft and how and their approach, those are the people that inspire me, that fuel me, that I get excited about. Um, that I would just want to see more, and I want to see like more every day. So yeah, that's what I would say. But like nailing it down to like one specific person, I can't really do that. But it's a group of amazing creatives whose work I see on a daily basis.
Yeah, I agree that there's definitely a lot of them, and I should have probably narrowed it down to say top three or top four. But yeah, I'm also
Huh.
familiar with Chisa's work and Tandiwe. I feel like her work is so signature. Like whenever I
Yeah,
see it anywhere, I know it's her work. the
Yeah.
photography and the patterns. I just know it has. And yeah,
Hey.
that's again part of the whole branding. I think that's really good branding because you know how work anywhere you see it. But yeah, I just wanted to know some of those people so I could also know who to reach out to potentially as to invite to be
Oh,
guests on the podcast too, as well. So yeah, and also
that's
for our audience to follow and get inspired from as well. So
now
yeah,
I'll send you the list. I'll send you the
the
list
list.
after.
I'll be happy to receive that. Okay, so just as we are rounding up, getting towards the end of the episode, I think I would also just want to get any two pieces of advice that you would give creative entrepreneurs who are just starting out, whether it's that they are just starting out from scratch, never having worked before, or those who are transitioning from doing something full time and starting their own thing. So, just any pieces of advice from your own journey that you would like to share.
This is gonna sound cliche, but it's okay. But what I'm gonna say is do it scared. Because I think a lot of the time our mind holds us back because we don't know what the outcomes are and we can't really predict like exact things like this is gonna happen and that sort of thing. But you never really know up until you try it. And the one thing that you could not be doing could be the thing that changes your entire trajectory. So just do it. It's very cliche, but just go ahead and do it. If you are transitioning, or if you're doing a career pivot, like what I will do, realistically, I would encourage you to have a plan, um, because creative entrepreneurship can be very unpredictable, like we've been talking about. So make sure that you have a safety net of some sort. If you're going to run experiments, if you're going to explore, different strategies and that sort of thing, just make sure that if you're in your 9 to 5, you're putting funds aside to ensure that you can actually make like a proper breakout, as opposed to sort of landing in a ditch as soon as you leave your job. Um, that would be my very practical advice for career pivoting and transitioning and all of that. But overall, becoming an independent designer is not easy, and that's the reality of the situation. And I think that people assume that, hey, if sort of start putting my work out there, millions of people should come rushing to me, and everything should be all good and dandy. But it really does take time to build. It takes even more time to build something that is sustainable and dependable. So you want to make sure that you give yourself grace in that regard. Do what is necessary, but also don't get dejected by the fact that 5 people liked your post or one person liked your post. That's one more person than you had before. So that is something that you should be celebrating as well. There's 5 people or 5 people who showed up for you and they weren't there when you started this thing. So that's how you should also look at it. And you keep building momentum as you go and you go and you go. But yeah, it was supposed to be short advice, but it became long. But I hope it helps you and it helps your soul. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was very fine if it was long. I didn't specify if it had to be short, short or long. Just advice in general. But yeah, thank you, and I'm also taking that advice to self as well. And I hope our audience would, put that into practice too as well. And towards the end, I also just like to ask some more fun questions. You don't have to go too deep into any of these ones. Just something short and quick. So first of all, what has been your favorite project so far that you've worked on? It could be a personal passion project or a client project, anyone you pick. But is there anyone that's like your favorite?
Yeah, so threads for me, it's definitely a favorite. I think just being able to explore textiles, getting an understanding of what the patterns mean, just seeing how colorful and vibrant everything is. Absolutely enjoyed vectorizing that entire project, to the point that I'm actually thinking of expanding it into something physical. So that has been a personal passion project of mine. But yeah, that's definitely top. Definitely top.
I mean, it also happened to be the one I found you through. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely a special special project. And okay, next one. So if you weren't doing branding and design, all webflow design and all, what do you think you'd be doing if you went into the design industry?
Oh, okay. You know what? The more I think about it, I think I'll probably want to do something with my hands. So like pottery or like build furniture, um, or paint or something. But I think I'll definitely wanna make stuff with my hands. I've also thought about this, and if it's not that, then I think I'll do like architecture. So like really cool like architectural designs that are inspired by like olden day like African civilizations and that sort of thing. Like I think that's what I'd want to get into. But yeah, I think I would still, if I had to change my career path and not do like science or anything like that, I would still want to make things with my hands.
All right. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. You said you've always been crafty anyway, and crafty in a good
Mhm.
way. Crafty.
Okay.
So it it makes sense that you would go in that direction. Okay, another one. So are there any, future plans or goals or projects that you might want to share with us to anticipate, or should we, you also don't have to share anything. We could just anticipate and wait till we see it on your pages. So, but are there any things you'd like us to know that you're going into, or any new field you're trying to pivot into, or something?
So I'm not gonna share too much detail, but I've been working on something this year. It's a platform that hopefully will help out a bunch of African like designers or designers of African descent when it comes to discovering work and that sort of thing. So it's my baby that I'm keeping very close to my chest. But hopefully you'll be seeing it soon enough. Um, it's been a bit of time and a bit of work that has gone into it. So sorry, I had a vision of when I thought I would be done with it, but that has since passed. So I'm just giving myself grace and allowing for the process to take over, and it'll be done when it's done. So yeah.
All right. That's enough information. That's enough information. So, guys, watch out for the platform.
The
The platform
platform.
is going to be it's going to be here soon. But yeah. Last one. I mean, I feel like you've already touched on this a bit, but can you nominate another creative that you'd like to see be a guest on this podcast? Just one.
Just one.
Yeah.
What? One is fine.
Okay, two. Let's make
One.
it two.
Okay, let's make it three. Sam,
Three is fine. Mm-hmm.
professional as such designs.
Mm-hmm.
Chisa, obviously Jefferson Chisa,
Okay.
and I Francis, but I don't know if he's on. Francis, I'll send you his handle. Yeah, I think they're great, and I would really love to hear what they have to say.
So, Sam, Francis, and um, last person, Chisa.
And
Yes, yes. So just this is a way to show that someone else has also asked for you to be on the podcast. So when we come to you, when we come to you, yeah. But thank you so much. And also, whoever is listening to this, you can also follow their pages as well, because their work is also inspiring as well. So yeah. Fungi, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. Thank you for everything you shared today. I found them really insightful. I'm going to apply them to my own creative practice, and I hope that our audiences also enjoy the conversation. And I hope that you, Fungi, as well, also enjoyed sharing your story with us as well. And yeah, where can our audience find you online, Fungi? Where can they follow you?
so if you go to my website, fungidube.com, all my social handles are at the bottom. So you can find me anywhere there. I spend a lot of time on Instagram, or enough time on Instagram. Also play around on Twitter. but we can connect on LinkedIn. But you'll find all my social media handles on my website.
All right. And I repeat again, please visit her website. It's beautiful. Like, it's featured on Webflow. It's that good. So please make sure you visit. And also, if you have any brand identity projects, please reach out to her as well. Reach out. Yeah. All right. So yeah, to all our listeners, if you're watching on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe. And if you're listening on any other podcasting platform, please don't forget to subscribe, turn on your post notifications, and anticipate what we have coming for you. Thank you again, and see you on the next episode of the Creative Africa podcast. Bye.